I'll try to hold you not super long, but you know, this goes where we go. Thank you for joining us here on Challenge the Norm. Anywhere you get your podcasts, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. It's a 5-star podcast with a 5-star audience. Today I have a dear friend with me, Madison McGhee. She is doing one of the more incredible things I've seen lately, recording her own podcast in which she is investigating her father's murder. It's called Ice Cold Case. You can get that where you're getting this. Madison, how are you?
I am as tired as I look, but I'm good, generally speaking.
Good. I'm glad to hear. How are you? No complaints. I think we're all in this take it a day at a time state of mind. So
yes,
that's sort of where I am too. I'm sure you're hearing all manner of feedback in every bit of range, but the thing I keep telling you is I get secondhand anxiety listening to this on a weekly basis. And it seems like that is, and I don't mean this in any type of strange way, but kind of the point. Like, it is a very personal journey, and it's a very raw and real-time thing. Like, the emotional part of it for you, I can imagine, is something that is pretty heavy.
Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums it up. It's been sort of this whirlwind of emotions, and I ride the roller coaster every day. Some days it's very easy to talk about, and some days it's more difficult. There are days where we'll go into the studio to record, and we have everyone there. We've rearranged our schedules. And then it's like, sorry, guys, I can't record today. Like, I'm just not in a place to record. And so that's been weird because I've never really done anything like that. I mean, I don't think anyone's ever really done anything like this, but I've never done anything like this where it's so emotionally taxing that normally I'm able to push through. And if you're tired, you drink a coffee and you go to work. If you're hungover, you have a Pedialyte and you go to work. This is like, there's moments where I can't push through. And that's been really weird because I'm not used to that. I'm always able to sort of get over whatever it is or get through it. But sometimes with this, there's moments where it's like, today, you just can't. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine, to compound this, knowing that, and you being very upfront about it, that it is an uncomfortable topic for even members of your own family. And in some cases, even now, there are odd messages. There's feedback that is a little bit strange. There's what feels on the outside looking in like very vaguely veiled threatening types of messages. I'm sure this adds to the whole weight of the experience.
Yes. There's definitely this weird level of confusion in that these are people that are my family members who should want this solved as well. So what's happening here? Why are you so upset? Why are you so pressed that I'm doing this? Not only to the point of internally being upset, but externally saying the things that they're saying. So the sort of underlying threats, the messages, the comments, the we used to call them subtweets, whatever the Gen Zers are calling them now, where they're posting about me without saying it's me or tagging me. But I know. And then there's comments, and it's been really weird because most of them, if not all of them, have come directly from family. There is not a stranger out there who is saying I shouldn't be doing this. It's my family members saying I shouldn't be doing this. And that raises a lot of red flags and almost motivates me more to get to the bottom of this, because it lets me know, A, something really sketchy is going on, and B, I'm really freaking close to finding out what happened.
Yeah. And I know that that's got to be, and I'll get around to the content part of it, but I know it's got to be a bit of an isolating experience in a lot of ways where the support for this is, it's coming from where it's coming from, from those of us who know you and those of us who in the course of this whole journey have become a little bit more invested in seeing this happen. And to feel in a way a bit on an island doing this. Does that sound accurate?
It is so funny the way that I've said that exact sentence so many times in the last year, in the last week. I've constantly been saying, I feel like I'm on an island. And I say that all the time because it's the only way that I know to describe the feeling I'm feeling right now. And I do have support, and sometimes our minds play tricks on us and we think we're alone when we're not really alone, but it does feel like no one understands because no one does understand. This isn't like that universal heartbreak feeling. This isn't that universal death in a family feeling. I don't know anyone who has investigated their dad's murder under these circumstances like I have. And so it does feel like there is literally no one who understands. And when I go through that wave, and luckily I'm surrounded by a team of people who are very sensitive and empathetic to that. But when I'm trying to explain, I can't record today, or I don't feel like writing this episode today, to try to get other people to understand why is very hard. And so, yeah, it can feel really, really isolating, especially when the only other people who maybe could resonate with how I feel don't want me to be doing this.
Mm-hmm. That, again, props for pushing the way that you do. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction of this. I know I said I want to get at the content. I want to get at the construction first because most things that fall under what we would call the true crime genre are very much like the same thing. It's sensationalized in some ways. It's very much clones of the same thing. And when you got into doing this, how did you decide that this was going to be sort of a real-time thing instead of like, here's story start to finish, and here are a whole bunch of questions I'm going to lay out, but they're all hypotheticals and there are no real answers?
I went back and forth about the format for the podcast and how I was going to tell this story. And that was because of a lot of different influences and other people wanting to be involved and having an opinion on how it should go, and then deciding sort of to do it on my own. I had a lot of influence from other true crime podcasts that exist in the landscape, of either examples of how I wanted to do it or examples of how I knew I didn't want to do it. And I think that really informed how I was going to do this. I think also I'm investigating it in real time. I did a ton of research leading up to the release, but now there's more tips coming in and there's more information to digest. So it is happening in real time now. So that's been really interesting. I've really had to pivot and shift. I thought it was going to be like this. I had an outline for a whole season, and like halfway through it was like, well, now none of this is relevant. Now we have to pivot and shift and sort of change things up. So yeah, constructing it, there is a format that if you are really, really in tune, I think you can sort of see. There's a cold open, there's parts, there's sections. The music sort of stops and starts when a new section begins and ends. But that was all because of my production background. And I knew exactly what I wanted this to sort of sound like, which was a documentary in audio form. I like when people ask me like, oh, you have interviews? I'm like, yes, but it's not like what we're doing right now. It's not a sit down episodic interview. It's a documentary, but you're listening to it. And the interviews are spliced in with the narration, and everything that you would see in a documentary, you're listening to in the podcast. And that was very strategic in how we constructed it.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it does lend to a more authentic feel. It doesn't feel like this is like a serialized fiction. It doesn't feel like that, especially because we know this is all real and based in reality and a thing that's ongoing. And as you get deeper into it, it really does grip you. Like for me listening, I think of the way I do it, where I'm like, I'm not going to be doing anything else for those minutes in the day, because it is both engaging mentally to the point where I need to focus on it, and engaging emotionally to the point where if I'm doing anything else, I'm going to ruin that other thing because I'm thinking about this thing. And as you have been on this path, you're getting a lot closer. I mean, as you've already said, but what's been, I guess, the most interesting is not the word, but the most compelling thing that's coming up for you right now, as far as you getting close to finding an answer?
Oh, that's such a good question. I feel like all of the different connecting pieces, all the connective tissue to this case, to me has been so fascinating, because in the beginning, I had a friend who produced a really, really popular true crime podcast. And so I reached out to her for some advice on what to do. And she said, go for the low hanging fruit. So if there's, your dad had like one big enemy, look into that first. And that might not be it, but look at it, because then you can rule it out and then you can keep going. And that might reveal something else and so forth. So that's what I did. And when I did that, there wasn't just one. There were multiple people that were super close in proximity to my dad that could have done this. So I started to look into them as separate things, separate theories, that if one was true, the other couldn't be. And if this one was false, then this one could be true, sort of thing. And I think the really interesting facet of this case is that the longer I look into it, the more all of these theories connect to each other. And that one being true doesn't necessarily mean that one is false. And they could have a bit of truth in all of them. And that's been super fascinating, at looking now at not only how all of these people are connected to my dad, but how all of these people are connected to each other, and finding that tie and realizing that, oh my gosh, this is very layered. And it's been very, very, very interesting and heartbreaking to see how organized this was.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I don't want to give it away for folks who haven't listened to this one yet, but as we got into, I'm remembering the 7th episode, I was like, if I had hair, it would all be standing up, because of where we ended up with. Like, there is one central player that keeps showing up in every version of every theory into what has happened. And like once that connection gets made, I was like, whoa, okay. So I need to stop what I'm doing. I need to sit down and just sort of breathe for about a good 20 minutes, because this is a little scary.
Yeah.
And again, this is like a secondhand, like I'm listening and I'm like, oh my God. But to be like, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah, it's really, really complex, but also so simple at the same time, which is the weirdest contradiction. But it is incredibly layered with a lot of detail. and a lot of different sub storylines, but at the same time, it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been a little frustrating as well.
Right. And I know that learning things about your parent is always an interesting part of adulthood, right? Like, I learn things about my parents all the time, and it just you go with that toward my parents are people, and they had whole lives before I came into existence, and this. What is this? What is it like to learn what you're learning about your dad right now?
Oh, it's been so bizarre. And I think it's cool, but it's also like cringy a little, I guess, would be like the word to use. But it's cool in the sense that like when you learn about your parents, you learn about yourself. Like I think about when I meet my friends' parents and I go, oh, that's why you are the way you are, right? Like, oh, that's why you move your hands that way, or that's why you talk that way, or oh, you do that all the time. And you're like, oh, haha, you make so much more sense now because I've met your parents. And I feel a little bit of that with my dad because I didn't get to grow up with him. I'm learning about when people say, oh, he was so paranoid, or he had really bad anxiety, or he did this, 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 and this. I go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I get that. Like, I am like my dad in certain ways. And then you find out about sort of the escapades that they have been through. And you're like, oh, right. There's so much more to this. And I think what's really weird, I don't know the right word to use, but about this is that my dad wasn't just like a fraternity party animal in college. Like my dad was a drug dealer, police informant in like the ghetto of Ohio and West Virginia. So this isn't like my dad sitting around with like a whiskey telling these cool stories about like all the hot girls he hooked up with in college. It's like real shit. And I think that's what's been so interesting and very jarring for me because I didn't grow up around any of that. So to know that that was happening with my own family, only 2.5 hours away from me, while I was living in like Charleston, West Virginia, going to like a school with white people, it's just very, very weird. And so having to kind of wrap my brain around almost that, like what could have been if I had grown up with my dad, would my life have been very different? Would I be the same person I am today? Would I have had the same opportunities? Is that all within you, or is that nature versus nurture? There's just all of these things that now are like going through my head about my own life because of what I'm learning about my dad, and feeling a little bit of like, I don't know, like embarrassed is the right word, but like my mom obviously has a history of like drug addiction and drug abuse and has been clean for several years now. But even when people in my hometown will see me, they'll be like, oh, how's your mom? And I get embarrassed, even though that has nothing to do with me. And I didn't do any of that stuff. It's still embarrassing. And so now I'm learning about my dad and I'm telling the whole world about it. And I'm feeling that embarrassing feeling also of like, when people start talking about my dad's murder now, it's always coupled with, well, he was a drug dealer. And then you're like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, should I be embarrassed by that? Like what? I don't know. It feels kind of weird. So yeah, it is very interesting. And just the differences between, in my mind, the seriousness of what my dad's past looked like versus like finding out that like, your mom hooked up with her college professor or something.
Right. And the other side of that, I think is like, you understand who they are, faults and all, and it does, or it does not, change your view of them, your perception of them. I think for people, it really obviously is a case by case thing. Like there is no one way this goes, with understanding the lives that your parents lead or led before you came into the picture. And I don't know. I find that to be a very, as you put it, a very illuminating about yourself type of experience where you figure out like, oh, okay, this is where I'm getting all that from. This is why I do what I do. But, and I also understand that in some cases, this kind of brings up maybe some resentment that might have been just buried there. And I don't know what it's done for you, but do you think of your dad any differently knowing this?
That's such a weird question because I didn't know him super well because I was so young. So in my mind, this just is who my dad is. And I think that kind of goes back to there's this, my friend is a wonderful balloon word artist on Instagram, and he posts these like quotes in balloons on Instagram, but he had one and it was like, sorry for like being upset with you for not being the version I romanticized in my head. And I feel like with my dad, that's super true because I could only imagine what he was like my whole life. And like, imagine that like, oh, my dad would be here for my graduation, or like my dad would be here for this big thing, or my dad would be at my 16th birthday party. And I'm almost fortunate that I get to remember him like that and believe that. That might not be true. I don't know. He's not here. So I just believe these things. And so finding this out about my dad really only shattered this like fake version of him that I had and not the real version that I knew, because I didn't really get to know him that well. Now, I don't think that I would love him any less. Like, I still love my mom, and my mom is literally insane, but we don't have a super close relationship. So I do wonder, would we be close? Would we talk? Would it just be like, you know, I love you, but I have to distance myself from you? Would he even still be involved in these things? I don't know. And it's weird to try to like think about that and like the what ifs and the fake scenarios.
Right. And I know you mentioned talking a lot to your sister in the course of this. How has your relationship with her evolved?
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. We talk all the time. It's so weird. Mostly about this, and I wonder what we'll talk about when this is all solved and done. But I mean, I guess that will be a long time, so who knows. But we went from literally never speaking. I don't think I talked to my sister for like 15 years at all. And then because of Facebook, we chatted every now and then it was like silence because she was very nervous about me investigating this. And then once she kind of came around, it was like, okay. And then once this came out, we talk all the time. We're sharing info that we're getting from people. We're going over theories. I review a lot of the stuff that ends up in the episodes with her, mostly because she says a lot and I want to make sure that she's comfortable with me saying like, oh, you said this name. Is it okay that I put this out there that you said it, or should I try to conceal somehow? But she's been super open with like, put it out there. She's like, let's just make everyone squirm and figure it out later. And that's been incredible. And our relationship has definitely evolved over the last year. We saw each other for the first time in 20 years in August of last year. So that was crazy. I met her. She has 3 kids. And her oldest daughter looks exactly like me. It's super weird. I've never met a human being that looks like me like this before. Like, she looks more like me than like my sister. And I'll have to send you a picture. It's so creepy. I'm like, oh, if I have a kid, like this is what my kid would look like. It's so weird. So that was really special. And like her daughter was like 14 or 15 when I met her. And I had never met her before. So it's like, that's how long it's been since we've seen each other. So we are working into a relationship, but it's hard. I mean, we don't really know each other, and it does feel at moments like, oh, I really like, we're strangers, but we're bonded by this thing and we're siblings and we love each other. And that's just such a powerful, I've never experienced that before with someone I really don't know. Like being like, I love you and I really don't know you that well. I couldn't tell you your favorite color, your favorite food, whatever, but like, I love you. And that's really weird.
So you're digging up family members that you've either not spoken to in a long time or maybe never spoken to at all, or um, it. This whole thing has an interesting way of bringing the family together in ways that they may or may not be comfortable with, and to see that, there's always a way that tragedies will bring a family together. Um, and then what comes of that, comes of that.
Yeah, I've gotten really close with her. I've gotten really close with another cousin who's pretty distant. I guess not that distant from me, but we had never met before. We still have never met in person. Actually, two cousins I've never met in person that we've gotten pretty close with over this. And everyone else, it's actually done the opposite. So I think they're all coming closer together because they have a common enemy, which is me, and they do not like me. So that's been really interesting. I mean, a lot of those messages I'm getting and comments are from cousins of mine that I've never met in person ever. Like if they didn't have the same last name as me, I'd be like, wait, who are you? Like, I don't know who you are.
Mm. Wow. And as you stand right now, I know you mentioned you recorded it. Today is Friday. It is August 18th. You recorded yesterday.
Yes.
How close
we recorded,
do you feel right now?
Oh gosh. I mean, look, I have a theory of what happened. I have an idea of who I believe was there, why they did it, how they did it. And that is that. I can't prove it besides context and motive and all the things that just don't really matter in court. But I really feel strongly that I have done so much research that I've put these pieces together and that the puzzle fits. So now it's a matter of I'm adding a little bit of color and context to the story in this next episode. And then in episode 9, I'm just going to tell you what I think happened and let you also agree, disagree, say, wait, what about this? Did you think about this? And then my goal is to put so much pressure on the sheriff's department to make an arrest, figure it out, have the prosecuting office take it to a grand jury, see if there's enough for a trial, and go from there. But they had someone in custody before, and I think it's very negligent and irresponsible to have let them go and never have proven that they didn't do it.
To motivate the authorities to get back at this, I mean, how have they given an indication of how willing they would be to look again?
Yeah, they've said that they will. But I have not heard from them since the release of the first episode. They've not reached out to me once. Granted, I haven't reached out to them, but I've been busy making this podcast and investigating their cold case. So I haven't heard from them at all. I've been told by both the prosecuting attorney's office and the sheriff's department that they're both willing to do things. So the prosecutor said that he's willing to take this back to a grand jury if there are new witnesses that have come up. And the sheriff's department said that they're willing to go back and look at old evidence. So whether or not either of those things have been discussed internally since then, I don't know because I haven't heard from them. But I'm hopeful that basically it's like that thing that your parents tell you, and it's so annoying. Like, you can only control what you can control. I can't control them. I can't control what they do. But what I can do is make a fucking good podcast and get people to care. And if they start calling the Belmont County Sheriff's Department, they start calling the Belmont County Sheriff's Department. And if that puts pressure on them to do something, so be it. Because the only thing in my control right now is telling people this story. So I'm going to do that to the best of my ability, because that is what I do. That is my job. That's what I'm good at. And that's in my control. So if that has this ripple effect that trickles into their office and their front desk, so be it. Because that's what I can control. And I will do whatever I can to motivate them and put pressure on them. And I hope that they pay attention and listen. But I can't make them do anything, which is so messed up. And I could go on a tangent and I won't, about just how unfair it is. I don't pay taxes in Belmont County. I don't live in Ohio, but a lot of people do. And how would they feel if their loved one's 21-year-old cold case was just sitting in a drawer while you're paying their salary and they're walking around doing traffic tickets and all these other silly little things and not investigating this case? So I just want them to do more and at least listen to my podcast. I think I'm bringing up some pretty interesting points of views and perspectives and facts that maybe they didn't consider before. I'm talking to people that maybe they haven't talked to before. And so at the very least, consider, but I don't feel like that's something that they're taking seriously. And I think that they think eventually I'll let this go, and I won't.
Mm-hmm. And you have all of the documentation that you have been looking over, available publicly.
Yes.
Which obviously supports the points that you're making. And that I'm just, again, in awe of how you just sort of have to the way you manage this, I would say it's the word I'm looking for. It is such a deeply personal, deeply moving series of events to say, not only am I telling you what's going on here, I'm showing it to you. I'm showing you the dots that I'm connecting, showing my work as far as where to go with all of this. And I think, at least for a consumer perspective, that does compel just a little bit more.
Yeah. And that was the goal. It was in this really dark way. I knew no one was going to care about my dad's murder if it wasn't presented in an entertaining way. Why would they? My dad's Black, was murdered 21 years ago, drug dealer from Ohio. Who cares about that? That's not a sellable story. That's not a story that makes headlines. That's not a story people care about. He wasn't a symbol of justice. He wasn't murdered by the police. No one cares. So I knew going into this, not only did I have the burden of making something that would find its way into people's ears, it had to be good, because the standard they were going to hold my thing was much higher than the standard they would hold a more quote unquote sellable case. And you can pass along a subpar podcast if the victim has a clean record, is from a suburb, white. So I had this really big burden of making this like undeniably good and undeniably entertaining, which is such a weird dichotomy considering I'm talking about my dad's murder. And I kept saying, like, I don't want to do this podcast. I had to do this podcast because that was the only way to get people to care. I've posted about my dad's murder on my Instagram. I've talked about my dad's murder with my friends. They're not out and about telling the world that someone needs to do something. So what else could I do? There was nothing else I could do. I had to do this. And that's been such an annoying thing, is that I had to make like Netflix level quality trailers and this amazing podcast that would compete with Wondery and all of these other networks just to get people to care.
Mm-hmm.
But now I've done that. I've made the show. It's freaking good. And it tells my story without it being told by some comedian who has a true crime podcast. It's my story from my own mouth, done really well, high quality. So now what? Now what's the excuse for people not to care?
Mm-hmm. And I think that quality of it being that this is a demand in a way to say this is important and I need you to care and I want you to care and I want to find some type of resolution at the end of this. This is not like just some labor of, oh, let me just see what happens. Like, ha ha ha. This is not, it's not typical. And I think to your point, it is such a relatable type of thing because no one would want to see this happen. No one would want to be in a position where like, hey, I lost a parent and have no idea why, and no one can tell me why, and no one is apparently that invested in figuring out why. And like that is hard for anybody under any circumstance. But the fact that the way you record and script this, it does give that level of emotional gravity while at the same time saying, but we have a job to do in this moment. Like, I feel what I feel about it, but I need you to understand it.
Yeah, I think our billboards say it best. Help me solve my dad's murder. Like, that's what this is for. It was a cry of desperation to find justice and closure for this case. I am not doing this for fun. I am not doing this as like some passion project that I'm like super excited about. This is exhausting work. I am truly exhausted in every way. I've never felt worse. And this is all to solve this case. And at the end of the day, I recognize that there may not be justice served in a courtroom, but if I can go to bed at night and know what happened to my dad, I can live with that. Mm-hmm. But I will not stop and I will not quit doing this until I am certain that my theory is correct and that I have solved my dad's murder. But I need help. Mm-hmm. And I'm not getting it currently from anyone who can really do anything. So now I need help from the court of public opinion to say, oh yeah, Belmont County should be doing more.
I think that's a sobering thought to say all I need is the truth, whether or not it leads to consequences.
Yeah. I mean, and unfortunately, because of how botched this investigation was, I don't know if there ever can be consequences. And who's responsible for that? Because there is no accountability for the police not collecting evidence. And if that's the difference between convicting someone and not convicting someone, are they responsible? I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do know they aren't, but it's not fair.
You mentioned fun and passion projects, and this not being one of them. Do you have any fun or passion projects that are otherwise occupying your time, or is this the big thing that that keeps you up every night?
I'm always working on like 100 things at a time. This is definitely all consuming, but there are some things in the works that I'm working on with friends that are, I mean, my whole life, the last 2 years has really elevated. I mean, you remember my YouTube days. And then I did local news, and now I'm like in LA making like mainstream content. And so everything is elevated. Stakes are higher, content has to be better. It's such a weird world I find myself in now. But because of that, it's super exciting because now I get to like pitch my own stuff. And so working on a couple things that I'm not pitching at the moment because of the strike. I support the writers and the actors. But getting those things prepped and ready to go for when that time comes. And it's exciting because I get to work on stuff with friends and it's on a big scale. And that's really, really cool. I'm not brainstorming like a YouTube series anymore. I'm brainstorming like film and television ideas. So that's really, really fun and exciting. And that helps sort of balance this. And then my day job, quote unquote, I'm freelance, but I work on a lot of unscripted television. So I am grateful because of the strikes, I'm able to work on unscripted projects. So I'm actually currently filming a television show right now for Food Network. And so that also takes up a little bit of like that mental space. But also it's all very time consuming. So my amount of time that I can do everything is very limited and I'm very overwhelmed, but I think it's very necessary for me specifically to just have my hand in a bunch of little things just to have a reset and not actually lose my mind.
Right. And you're doing all of this while also dealing with home ownership.
Oh yes, never buy a house. That's the theme of my Instagram. I just post the woes of owning a home. It's truly horrible, terrible. I would never recommend anyone do it. And yeah, I never trust a general contractor, and just don't, unless it's like turnkey and you paid cash, which I don't know how as a millennial you could do that, but if you can, like, do it. And if you can't, don't do it. Don't do it as an investment. Don't do it thinking that land is great to own and, oh, this is such a good idea. It's not. It's a horrible idea and you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
Like, I would ask, like, why do you say that? But then I see what you're doing, and I'm like, you are doing a complete overhaul of a house that you bought.
Yeah. Long story short, I wanted to fully gut my house, and I hired a general contractor that I met in the parking lot of a Home Depot, which is red flag number one.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically didn't do any of the things he said he was going to do. And the things he did do were done so terribly that the new general contractor who came in to like give me a new quote asked if I did them myself. And I was like, oh, the thing I paid $30,000 for looks like I did it myself. Cool. So yeah, it's dumb. It's really dumb. So now I have a new guy coming in looking to see what it's going to cost, and he's building a quote, and I'm very nervous to see what my damage is going to be.
Yeah, that's fair. See, you know me. I'm the type of maintenance that I require is a little bit like, I don't want to do yard work. I don't want to do anything I don't have to do. I would rather buy my time back and let someone else do all that stuff for me. Like, I'd buy a condo and live in that, and I'm good.
Yeah. And that should have been the move. But it wasn't. And unfortunately, because now everything is such a mess, I can't even like sell it. Like, there is no return receipt for a home. So I'm just the only way out is through. And I think that is currently a common theme in every facet of my life. On so many levels, I just have to keep going.
Mm-hmm. Amen to that. Houses, like, and these interest rates and everything else, like.
Oh, well, so that's, but if you're listening and you even care, honestly, now is the time to buy if you're going to do it, which you shouldn't, but buy when the interest rates are high because the home prices are less and you can never change the price of your home. If the interest rates are 3%, your home is going to be $100,000 more. And that's the lowest you will ever pay. I am currently paying the highest I will ever pay. But when you get a really low interest rate, that's the lowest you'll ever pay. Because you're never going to be able to refinance it for less, because it'll never be lower than like 2% or whatever it was during COVID. So that's it. That's the low. I got my house for less money and I'm paying more interest right now. But in 3 years, if the interest rates go down, I can refinance. And now I have a good interest rate and I got a good price. But if you're paying $100,000, $200,000 more than I paid for the same house with a lower interest rate, then that's it. You bought that house for way more money than me.
Oh boy, no, condos and townhomes. That's all I'm ever buying.
That's my pro tip is don't be afraid of the high interest rates, because you can probably get a better deal, and eventually everything ebbs and flows and you can always refinance.
This is true. This is very true.
Same if you're getting a condo. I mean, if you're taking out a loan for it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. How's your cat?
She's good. She's literally sitting right here. She's so sweet. Here, I don't know if you can't see, but she's just laying beside me. She's been like the sweetest thing lately. Just like, I don't know. I think she knows I'm like going through it, because she's not very cuddly or loving at all. And she's been like sitting with me and like, I don't know. She knows. But she's so sweet.
That's good. That's really good. Yeah. Hey, you know what? Pets, like, my favorite thing about pets is giving them back. But the thing that I recognize that it does, I mean, you know, it's really good emotional support for people when they need it.
I had never had like a pet as an adult, only as like a kid growing up. And she's like my first pet that's mine. And I am like, I mean, I'm obsessed with this thing. Like, I am so obsessed with her. It's so weird. I never thought, like, I'm not a person who like thinks about having kids or anything like that, but good God, I love this thing.
Well, before I let you go, Madison, I got a couple of pointed questions for you. The first one is, what is challenging you right now?
Leveling up in a short way, but I can answer long form. I think, like just taking everything to the next level. I think a lot of my friends are in this boat, including you, where like we sort of peaked where we were. And now it's like, how do you break that next glass ceiling to get to the next level? And I'm struggling with that. And I'm really trying to do that. So that's sort of my biggest challenge. But then also dealing with that, then you're now at the lowest tier of that level again. And that can, right now I'm at the top of the current level I'm at. And that can be a fun place to be sometimes, and comfortable, to then have to break through and now be like, oh, now I've moved up, but now I'm at the lowest tier of that. So, that's been a really big challenge.
And the flip side of the question now is, when you look at the world around you, what are you challenging right now?
Oh, very specifically, I'm challenging every official in Belmont County. No, but I think definitely the intersectionality of race and gender in film and television, and just challenging those norms. And my goal has been and always will be to like win an Oscar and make film and television at the absolute highest level possible. And I think kind of in tandem, what I'm challenging in the world is also a challenge that I'm facing, which is how to do that and how to get there, and pushing through and proving myself so that people see me and go, oh, Black women can do XYZ. And if I can do it, then the next time someone comes around, then they give them a chance. So you do feel like as you're moving forward and I'm on set or whatever, I'm the only woman of color on our team, and I'm the whitest Black person to exist. So that says a lot. But if I can prove that I'm good at my job, then the next time a Black woman applies, oh, well, Madison was really good, so let's give this person a chance.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel like I do carry that burden, and I don't carry it lightly, and I carry it proudly of, I have to prove myself to prove it for everyone who comes after me. And sort of be that normalizer for the people I work with, the white men I work with. And I also think about that in the sense that I'm from West Virginia too. So, you know, being someone from West Virginia and doing what I'm doing, the next time someone gets an application from someone from West Virginia, instead of thinking, oh, they're just some stupid hillbilly, they'll be like, oh, well, Madison did a good job, so maybe this person will do a good job. And so you're definitely like breaking those stereotypes and proving yourself while also paving the way for other people to have that like open door. And so I think those are some norms I'm challenging, especially because, I mean, gosh, film and television is white men city. And so, I mean, there's been a lot that's been done, but a lot of it's been, I would argue, performative. And so really doing it in a way where it's like, we're hiring you because you're talented, and we're hiring you because you have good ideas. And we know that because we allowed you to talk to us about your ideas, which I think is the biggest struggle. It's not that Black people don't have good ideas. It's that they can't have that meeting. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to meet the right people and network and do all of these things so that I can have those meetings, so that the next time someone's trying to have a meeting, they're like, oh yeah, we'll have lunch with you, or we'll talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. See, and the longer I go, you know, I see that you know, I've lived in West Virginia for 3 years, and I came to kind of understand the West Virginia versus the world state of mind, which is not entirely unfounded. I mean, to your point, you know, the stereotype is there, and it's not always true, and more often than not, it isn't true. So that I would agree with. And then to your point about intersectionality, I remembered about last month I went and I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to see this movie. It was not made for me. I don't want to see the Barbie movie. It's not for me. And I went anyway with a lot of friends of mine, all women. And the first thing I noticed was Issa Rae playing President Barbie was a choice, and a good one. And now I'm in on this movie. Now you have my attention. So I was like, all right, so now you have my attention, and I'll listen and absorb all the themes and ideas that you have for me on this one. I get it. But you're absolutely right. Like to make these spaces a little bit more diverse and inclusive in meaningful ways takes a lot of work, a lot of understanding, and a lot of, for the people who hold the keys to the gate, a lot of willing to take what they might feel is a risk.
Yes.
And
on both sides. I mean, I think that even just my comment about it being performative, in the beginning, it has to be. Mm-hmm. Because to go from not including people to including people will look performative regardless of the intention. Mm-hmm. But in order to get it to a point where that is the new normal, it has to be that way in the beginning. So on like our side, we have to just accept the performative behavior until it becomes a normal thing, and then allow it to be the normal thing. So there is give and take on both sides to be empathetic and understanding that, well, yeah, they're going to have to hire a Black person for DEI, because if they don't, then what are we even asking them for? But then allowing them after like a few years to be like, okay, and now what changes have been made here? So like letting this performative behavior happen in a sense to really impact change down the line. I think that there is this sort of, both sides have to be super understanding of like the position that everyone is in, which is you cannot go from nothing to something overnight. And in order to do that, it's going to be, okay, we're hiring 5 people and one of them is going to be Black. Well, now is that person going to feel like the token Black person? Sure. But then when they hire 5 people and one of them is Black, and then they hire 5 people, and now you have a whole team of Black people, and it happens organically, it's like, oh, I get how we got from point A to point B, but it took a minute. And so And then on the flip side of that, it's like, well, what if they do hire all 5 Black people? Are we all going to say, well, they're just doing that because of Black Lives Matter? Well, probably, but isn't that what we want? We want more Black people in the room. So it is a really, like, we're in a very weird time of like shift. And I feel like if we can just get through this like next like 4 years of like allowing things to marinate and allowing people to like who were hired during this sort of movement to be in their positions for a long time and move up the ranks and sort of do all of that work, I think we'll see like a massive shift. But we have to get through this point in time without like killing each other. So however we do that, I don't know, but I think that we'll see it in the organizations that really enacted it, you know, a few years ago, because it does just take time. But I think we will start to see the companies who got it, and the companies who didn't. And that will show very soon.
See, you raise a point that I never even considered, to talk about this in a long game type of outlook. Like, for the people who stand on the front line of it and then feel like they were done dirty or feel like they might be a martyr in some way, like, it is a bit hard to see past yourself in those moments, you know, to feel like the short sight is really the only sight that you have on it. And that is actually, again, very interesting and very compelling point you make that, again, I know I had never thought of. So now here I am learning things today.
Oh, I don't know about that, but it's just something that I think about because, you know, I get really frustrated in moments of like, oh, this company just hired like 10 Black people. Like, they're like, what is that going to do? Like, they're all going to get fired in a year and then everyone's going to shift or shuffle or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but if 3 of them stay, then they move up. And now you've got 1 VP who's Black, because that of those 10, 3 kept moving up the ranks. 1 of them made it to that level. And now they're super cognizant of that. And it's like, that's how this starts to shift over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I go back to like during the Black Lives Matter movement when it was really strong. One of my biggest critiques was, what is this doing for the long term? We're not going to be protesting in the streets in 2023. And here we are, and there are no longer these big, massive protests, right? Like, you can't do that forever. So that's wonderful that that's how you choose to protest. But for other people, what can they do that's really going to make lasting change? And that's, you know, you hear well, raise your kids to be understanding. Do this, have them be exposed to those things. Well, that can't happen overnight. I don't even have a kid yet. You know what I mean? It's like, that's going to be a long-term thing that we probably won't even get to see the benefit of, but what a better world will exist because of it. And so a lot of this is long-term. And I think that there are milestones that we can point to that we'd like to see that are, you know, in the meantime, more opportunity, better pay, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that for me, it's like, if those things start to happen, then imagine in 10, 15 years what it's going to look like.
And we will leave you with the imagining, because that's always a hopeful thing we can do. Well, Madison, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh,
today.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure. And I want to say, actually, for listeners, Norman and I met through the funniest circumstances. I just think it's hilarious. I don't know if you're going to intro it with this, but I'll just tell the quick version of the story. My wonderful friend Carly Sears passed away in 2016, and she was a student at the time at Ole Miss, where Norman went to school. And a few months later, Norman was interviewing for a news job in Charleston, West Virginia, and was sitting at a hotel bar. And my friend's mom was also sitting at the bar. And were you wearing Ole Miss, or like, how did she know?
No, the bartender there, It was the night before the interview. The bartender, I had happened to mention it to, because we were, just asking where I was from and everything. And again, I think the bartender maybe had gone to Florida, I think, but
Oh yeah,
she,
Lexi.
yes,
Oh,
yes. And she was like, oh, that woman's daughter went to Ole Miss. I was like, really? And then we went from there.
yeah, and then my friend's mom, Julie, she introduced us, and then you got me my job, my very first job ever at the same news station. You had already left, but you had introduced me to all the people, and I worked in news for like almost a full year, calendar year, almost one whole year, and it was all because of you, which is so crazy.
Yeah, that's true. We all are in places for reasons. I would never take away from that. Like, everybody is where they are for a reason.
Totally. I agree. And you had Anna on and we met her there. I mean, it's just so funny. The universe. I now live in LA, so I talk about the universe all the time. But the universe really just like did a thing here, and now we have a wonderful friendship, and it's just really, really cool.
Yes.
It's really cool.
Yes. Well, I know I'll catch up with you a little bit more offline here. But thank you again, Madison, and thank you all for joining us here on Challenge the Norm. Anywhere you get your podcasts, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars, because it's a 5-star podcast with a 5-star audience. And Ice Cold Case, anywhere you can get your podcast, anywhere you get this podcast, you can get that one too. And make sure you're sitting in a very, very secure, quiet place, because this thing will take you on a ride. So thank you all. We'll talk to you in a few days. Peace.